All right, well, let's start talking about this lecture. First of all, I want to tell you how privileged I am to be able to have these discussions about our Pathwork lectures, and it's just wonderful that we have all of us uh, been able to grow spiritually to the point where we can have the time, take the time to study these lectures and to reflect on them and to broaden our knowledge of spiritual truth. So the lecture we're going to talk about tonight was, I guess, 56 years ago, right? 1967, 33 plus 23. First, I did send out to everybody, as you may recall, there were a lot of materials that Eva had kept that were given over to the Pathwork Foundation through me. Magdalene Parakos, who was the stepdaughter of Ava's stepdaughter, the daughter of John Parakos. When John died of a heart attack in 2001, Magdalene kept all the materials that John had, including many things that Eva had. And those materials I was able to acquire. A guy in California, no, in Seattle, in Washington, named Udo Grossman. I negotiated a payment that he gave to Magdalene. So she gave these materials over to the Pathwork Foundation. I took possession of them until they can be archived. So one of the things there was a notebook that Eva had written in 12 spiritual laws. And one of them, I just sent to everybody, the law of personal responsibility. Did you guys get that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to briefly talk about that. That is, she says is the key to the pathwork. It's over here. All right, let's see if I can open this document. Can you guys see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. Let's see if I can make this work. All right, she says, and I'll read it, the law of personal responsibility. This is the main element of the guide's teachings. It is the primary principle which guides the pathwork. At first glance, this is hard to accept for most people. It seems so much easier even to accept defeat and blame circumstances or coincidence or the fault of others. Accepting the law of personal responsibility immediately wipes out self-pity, resignation, passive endurance, and smoldering resentments against the injustice of life. Yet this apparent hardship is the most hopeful, encouraging, and liberating truth of all truths. It enables the individual to resolve whatever problem he may have and open up life as a consequence. It makes defeat unnecessary. At the same time, it is the guiding principle on the search of self-confrontation. For whenever one arrives at a juncture from where there seems no way out, or where one cannot see where and how to change the self and one's circumstances, one can be quite sure that, no matter how deep the recognition may be, the important tool to unlock the door has not yet been found. This is why one can distinguish between those vital, profound recognitions and halfway recognitions that only lead to the way one must go. The former always give a sense of liberation, joy, strength, hope, and light. The latter may still have a debilitating effect. The former enable the individual to recognize the most unflattering truth without in the least diminishing one's sense of value, of worth, and integrity. Quite the contrary is true. The latter make the insight laden with guilt. When one has experienced a difference of these two types of recognition, one can protect oneself from hopelessness, or at least realize that the hopelessness is in itself a sign that the way out has not yet been found. It can then be an incentive, rather than a weakening factor, to surge on with all one's vigor until the real way out shows. Many of the following laws deal more specifically with this law. So I thought this was a good place to start our discussion tonight about the law of personal self-responsibility, which, as the guide says, quote, immediately wipes out self-pity, resignation, passive endurance, and smoldering resentments against the injustice of life. What do you think? Any thoughts about it? It does seem.
It ties in really well to tonight's lecture, especially since we're talking about that frustration effect, right, during the second
Yeah.
half of the lecture, where one is not taking self-responsibility and one is claiming, usually, often, in that case, some level of victimhood. So it's a great preface to the lecture, I think.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, you know, in political circles, they talk about personal self-responsibility, which is different. I mean, I think that the way it's used in political discussion today, you know, the concept, okay, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or, you know, it seems to, well, I would say it's sort of it's a much narrower lens. What the guide is talking about is much more broad and has a lot more to do with where we are spiritually and the whole breadth and depth of our experience here on earth.
Yeah, it's an openness, right? This responsibility.
That's
It's an
right.
openness. It's not a very focused one only on a specific issue. It's a very broad responsibility.
Ellen, hi there, it's Ellen here.
Hi,
Can
Ellen.
you make it a little, since I got it on late, I wanted to, can you make it a little larger when I try? You can do it individually and it moves to the side.
I'll try that. I'll try that.
Okay. Or if you can move it over to the center of the screen, then I can do it on my own computer. But let's see if it works.
All right, now I moved it to the center. Does that look better?
Now, and then I think now I can make it a little bit larger myself. And well, I lose some of it, but okay, wait, hold on. Did you just give me a second?
I largened it out.
Oh, that's
Okay, it's
beautiful.
good now. Now it's good. Because I wanted to is it actually defined here? What her definition of the guide's definition of the law of personal responsibility within this? It's
Well, I mean, this is what it is. I mean,
Okay,
it is
okay.
in other words, as the guide always says, you know, whatever we experience, we created it. We're responsible for it. That's not to say that's not supposed to be a kind of you know, hey, a harsh wake-up call, like a slap in the face with you know, a cold glass of water. It's basically a recognition that we have to plumb our life experience for a deeper understanding of why we find ourselves where we find ourselves. That the tools to transform our lives and improve our lives are within us. We obtain those tools through walking the path of self-facing. That's really what every lecture says, I think.
You know, I'd like to, you know, I guess my own observation through my life is that, you know, and having been, you know, heard this type of thing on my spiritual path, you know, every new age spiritual path talks about, you know, we recreate our reality. And I feel like that the whole spiritual path in itself is a discovery of actually being able to experience life that way, you know? So I think for me, it's always like this thing of self-kindness, because it's so easy to take the concept and beat yourself up with it. Oh, I'm fucking up. You see, I create everything, I'm fucking everything up. And that to me is like, for me, like the difficult part of it. And then it's like always about, you know, like, you know, not doing that, you know, finding a way to
Yeah.
myself.
Well, I just, you know, I've never been able to muster anger at the injustices of life. Maybe that's because I grew up in a privileged household, you know, with my parents both earning good money, middle class lifestyle in Upper Manhattan. But I mean, I never felt like anything was unjust. I'm not sure, I don't complain at all. Um, I guess, I mean, the guide says that accepting the law of personal responsibility immediately wipes out self-pity, resignation, passive endurance, and smoldering resentments against the injustice of life. Now, those are four things right there, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe once or rarely I felt self-pity, and then just for a moment, like if I get dumped by a girlfriend, oh shit, that's like poor me. But I can't say it really lasted for very long. I mean, I really,
Can I say
when I,
something?
go ahead.
That what I'm wondering when I hear this, that it's not taking in what I heard in the lecture about sort of like going with with the flow, or it's sort of the, not, sort of how it says, not being insistent, not giving up. And the sort of like the way of being able to go with the flow of, I guess, the universe or the energy. And somehow the way I read this, it doesn't seem to have that element in it of having, going with the divine flow and the unity of things.
Well, that's really key, I think, to understanding this lecture. I think that what the Pathwork says in a nutshell is that there are two positive forces that we can harness. One is the positive will of the ego, which is the aspect of ourselves where we're planning, thinking, making determinate judgments, executing things. And then there's what the lecture talks about, the giving over to the intuitive self. Both of those things have to be marshaled and cultivated. So those are the two tools we have. Number one, the tool of, the metaphor is that, the ego can bring you to the door of the temple or the church, but it can't go inside. But the work that you do to prepare you to encounter the intuitive self and to be imbued with spiritual strength, the ego can bring you to that. It's very interesting because I was just thinking that, Eva herself, when she gave these lectures, I was there for many of these lectures, where she channeled the guide. And it was like the same thing every time. Eva's sitting down, she's talking to people, she's engaged, she's animated, people are coming over. Hey, Eva, what's going on? She's talking to them. And then everybody gets quiet. They play the music, often this piece by Sibelius called the Berceuse. And then she nods quietly, she breathes a little bit, and then she bows deeply twice and inhales and somehow sits much more erect and much more straight, and then she delivers the lecture. Right, Marion?
Yes, yes.
Right? And then after the lecture is over, they play the music, she relaxes, and all of a sudden her posture changes, and then she opens her eyes. And usually somebody says, oh, Eva, that was a wonderful lecture. And then she says, oh, what was it? Oh, was it interesting? Like she has no recollection of what the lecture was about. She doesn't know what the guide channeled. And the reason I bring it up is because this is it. In other words, the ego and the strength and the planning that she brought to her own spiritual purification, being a Pathwork helper, doing all the correspondence that she did, all the work with John Paracas and everything else, that's the ego working to make it happen. But then when she goes and manifests the guide, that's the deeper spirit coming out. That is the intuition, unmediated by the ego. So if that's a sensible analogy, right? All the work we do leads up to the ability to yield to the transcendent, to the spiritual, to the intuitive. So
Yeah, I think, Alan, I'd also want to say partially to what Barbara mentioned, that it's incredibly true what you say, Barbara, because the two things have a hard time to overlap initially. But if you try to just take the word personal responsibility and individual that's listed in the lecture and not put them together, okay, I think it's really important to recognize when the guide is discussing the individual in the lecture, it's talking more about the ego. It's talking more about the sense of separation of the individual. Whereas when I'm looking at the personal law of responsibility, it's actually talking about the whole spiritual universe. And it's talking about how that universe manifests within yourself, both within your innermost nature as well as without. Okay, and so, you know, as I think the guide says in page 4 here, you will then find that not only do you not lose your individuality, but quite the contrary, you expand and become more yourself. And so even though the dichotomy initially feels like the two things don't necessarily collide very easily, in time, by seeing that what's within is the same as without, the individual starts to open up beyond that to see that it's not only personal, like individual responsibility, it's a collective responsibility. What we see in the world is also, it's not what we're at war with, it's what we are playing a part of as well.
Hey.
Yeah, Marion.
Um, Thank you. Thank each of you for your contribution. I'm not going to build on that because what comes out to me, especially when you said, Alan, you don't remember complaining. Well, here, I'm the complainer, so you don't have to be the complainer. I'm the complainer. And so I have no real insight about comparing the two because that's part of my personality. I have to learn to think. So I'm always a promoter of find your personality defense, your main one, your dominant one. And I very rarely give advice, but I'm trying to share it without. But for the first time, I have a little bit of oomph in this tonight. And that is because giving my complaining over to my higher self, I draw into such a deep relationship with so I use my complaining as a gateway. And that's the key, is when one is acting out the defense and when going through the defense to the unitive state, to the core of that, the core of it. And that is so vital in all this work. And even before the guide gave the lecture of reason, will, and emotion, it's woven into many of the lectures about it. It could, like in the defense lecture, it had something about unwinding your defenses. And in there was a little sentence in the original version of, and according to your own personality. And there was a key way back then. So somebody's way of, digging into this lecture may not be somebody else's, but the truth is always there for each of us. So I don't have any final result of all of this, except to say that I find that because the guide said the first step of transformation is observation. So I notice my critical self coming in and I'm complaining. So I put in my to-do list every day, 3 main complaint sessions so that I may, put a boundary around it. And I give it over to my higher self. And boy, I'm so grateful for the energy work because I really let it rip. Now, some other personality type's not going to do it my way. Get to that unitive state and to go through the defense. It'll be different for everyone.
All right. Thanks, Marion. So let's talk about the lecture itself. Cosmic pull toward union, frustration. Basically, the lecture can be stated fairly simply. The guide says that there is that underlying all the conflicts that we have, our images, our traumas, is something at fundamental cosmic conflict or cosmic dynamic, in that we are pulled toward unity. We are pulled toward unity. And it's very interesting because the guide says only the actual contact of one individual with another establishes the requisite conditions in the personality for true inner union. So it sounds pretty concrete, union with another. The guide talks about we have this pull toward union that we can't fight. That is the most basic aspect of our nature, but we're afraid of it. We stem against it. The ego is afraid of yielding to it. We have an instinct for unity, but somehow we place blocks in the way of achieving that unity. It's sort of like the way the sun is, right? I mean, plants are striving toward the sun. The sun is shining, and the most basic thing in the world probably is the fact that plants, the most basic creatures on earth, strive toward the sun. So in a similar way, the way I see it here in the lecture, we strive toward unity. We are pulled away from separation and isolation. It's interesting because one of the principles of evil, of course, is separation. Evil separates things, people from one another, creates lies, misconceptions, ways in which we distance ourselves from others. But this pull toward unity is a primordial force that we put obstacles in the way of. So, and the guide delineates what these obstacles are, what these blocks toward this unitive pull are. He says, there's a pull and there's a counter pull, page 1. Individual consciousness opposes this force, however, out of the erroneous idea that giving in to it means annihilation. Right now, this is the familiar conflict between the ego and the higher self, right? The familiar conflict. Ego doesn't want to be annihilated. Ego believes that it has to define itself in opposition to others. Ego believes zero-sum game. What hurts me might help you, but what helps you is going to hurt me. If you're doing well, I can't do well, right? The ego says, no, I have to maintain my individuality. Any giving in harms me, weakens me. I have to become stronger. It's sort of the satanic thing, right? I've got to build my own power and at your expense. But not to color it with such an evil cast, the guide says that we don't want to give in to our instinctual need to go and pursue toward unity, that we have a pull and we're fighting it. He says, to the degree you equate the life force with annihilation, you struggle against life itself. I wanted to read the famous guide's message about the inner voice that I like to read, the meditation about what the voice says, the voice within, because I think that that's really very relevant to our discussion tonight. And I could put that up on the screen. I want to read it. Let's see. Can you see it? Can everyone see that?
No, you
No,
have to
it's not
share your
up.
screen again.
Yeah.
I'll share the screen, yes.
Uh,
All right, here goes. Implementing screen sharing. All right, now can you see it?
Yes.
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 All right. The voice within you says, I am the ever-loving God, the ever-present creator, living within you, moving through you, expressing as you, as myriad forms, as you and you and you, as the animals, as the trees, as the sky, as the firmament, as everything that exists. I dwell in you, and if you allow me to act through you, to be known through your brain, felt through your feelings, you will experience my power that is limitless. You will not fear this power that manifests on all levels. The power is great, but give in to me. Give in to this power, to the stream that surges forth, that will make you cry and that will make you laugh, both in joy. For you are me and I am you. I cannot act on this level without you being an instrumentality for me. And if you listen to me, I will guide you through every step of the way. Whenever you are in darkness, you are away from me. And if you remember this, you will make steps to come back to me. I'm not far away. I'm right here in every particle of your own being. If you thus fulfill my will, you and I become more one, and I can fulfill your will.
Woo. That's cool.
So this meditation expresses the desire to give in to that intuition, to that deeper self, right? And when we don't want to hear that voice, we create these conflicts. We create the various kinds of pain and suffering that of resisting that pull toward the intuitive. The guide says, talks about fear of your deepest instincts, so you cannot ever relax and be unguarded about yourself. So it occurred to me that each one of us has our own ways of blocking this cosmic pull toward union, right? And I guess each of us has their own images and misconceptions that prevent us in particular ways from experiencing that deeper voice, that unity with that deeper self. So this would be a good thing to talk about. Maybe later on, if anyone wants to talk about the particular ways in which they think that they are blocking the pull toward unity. It's interesting, he talks about on page 2, the distrust of your instinctual self. So in some way, we have a deep instinct to follow this call for unity, but we're afraid to follow it. Deep within you know that you distrust the greatest spiritual force and thus life itself. The conflict also manifests as fear of your deepest instincts, so that you cannot ever relax and be unguarded about yourself, as I just said. And very interestingly, the guide talks about the body, not just the mind. And we can come, it brings in sort of core energetics in my way of thinking in the body work. You can't ignore what you feel in your body. It's not just about your mental concept. This is why people insist on dividing body and spirit, why the dualistic concept is perpetuated from generation to generation. So you seem to find your salvation in this very division, because through it you can justify your rejection of the life principle as it manifests within you. You thus stamp that which you fear as wrong or bad, while claiming that the denial of your very nature is right and good. You justify this irrational attitude by pointing to the most distorted manifestations of the life principle of the pleasure current as though they were proof of its badness. Thus, people have preached through the centuries that the body is sinful, while the spirit is supposed to be the opposite of the body and therefore good. Right? I mean, this is familiar, right? This is the old Catholic Church thing about the sinfulness of the body and the purity of the mind. This is one way of resisting that cosmic pull, right? So echoing what I said earlier about the deep nature of this conflict between the cosmic pull and the resistance toward it, he says, the misconceptions that we have, page 2, stem from the deep spiritual conflict that motivates you to accuse the great life principle of being the opposite of what it really is. And this is because the ego is afraid of annihilation. So part of you moves toward others and accepts your instincts and nature, but another side shrinks back from this movement. Deprivation, emptiness, meaninglessness, and a sense of waste ensue. You may then overcompensate by blindly, rebelliously misusing your life force. This leads to pleasureless experiences and seems to justify your sense of wrongness and danger. Here is truly a kind of life and death conflict. And then the next paragraph, the greater the conflict between giving into the cosmic force and opposing it, the greater the extent of your pain and problems. So what do we think about that? Is there a relationship between our pain and problems and the lack of the ability or desire to give in to the cosmic force? Yeah. Go ahead.
I just think you have to include conscious and subconscious in that, because I think that a person could have them like me, like consciously, like all, like so feel like I give into it, but the unconscious,
Yeah.
I think that's really important with that, because can be a
Right.
little mind like.
Absolutely. Well, that is the essence of the whole thing, which is raising consciousness, right? And the path of self-confrontation to make things conscious so that we don't have the unconscious loading the dice and making it impossible for us to grapple with our own resistance because it's unconscious. In fact, the guide on the next page, the guide says, again, talking about this deep cosmic pull toward unity, you can't maintain the resistance all forever. Nothing that opposes the life principle can be maintained forever. After all, the life principle represents ultimate reality, and fear of it is based on illusion. Illusion cannot be maintained indefinitely. The anxiety, this is a key sentence, the anxiety arising out of illusion can be eliminated only when this deep conflict is understood and honored. And when you finally allow yourself to harmonize with the creative principle. So that is the path of self-facing, right? I mean, to honor and understand the deep conflict is our path. That is what it's all about. To make the conflict conscious. So then I'll continue on page 3. Well, what's interesting also is that a digression at the end of the lecture, there's a question, right? Question and answer on page 7. And basically, the questioner said, what did you just say? It's like the questioner says, like, I didn't get that. What did you say again? Like, would you repeat that? The question, you discussed the cosmic pull and that becomes negative in the individual at a certain period of his development. Could you explain this further? Basically, it's like, what? What did he say? So the guide restates the whole lecture in the answer. To wit, it says, when people oppose their cosmic pull and struggle against it, conflict arises, right? The cosmic pull always remains stronger than the counter pull since it is a primary force, while the struggle against it is secondary and superimposed. So you are still pulled toward contact, but your counter pull denies the primary force. So the negation combines with the original force and negative contact ensues. So far, so good. The actual contact taking place expresses the pull toward others. The pain arising from it expresses the counter pull. To the degree you fear the cosmic pull and its destiny, love, which can only grow in a climate of fearlessness, must be absent from the contact. The fear produces defenses, hurts, anger. All these enter the contact and combine with the pleasure principle. So when we resist the cosmic pull, we negate it. We try to negate it. And the negative contact creates a dynamic where we attach the pleasure principle to this interaction between the pull and the counter pull. Negative contact that manifests in being hurt expresses itself in a tendency to be taken advantage of. You will always manage to put yourself at a disadvantage. You will be driven into damaging behavior patterns. On the sexual level, such an individual is masochistic. Then on the other hand, because you fear your cruelty, your need to derive pleasure from hurting others, you may reverse it and direct it against yourself. Since all of this takes place, right, Ellen, on a blind unconscious level, you do not know what you're doing. You do not know how you are driven, so you're unable to stop the destructive process.
Well, Alan, I think it's pretty helpful to at least when you can see that it's not a conscious item, to raise it from the unconscious. You can look at what negative contact might be in all three areas that the guide talks about, which is negative emotion, negative thought, and negative will. And if you look at all three of those items with some level of directed consciousness towards your present state, then it's easy to make those things more conscious, because you can't deny how some people can deny how they're feeling. Some people can deny how they're thinking. Some people say, oh, I'm not thinking, I'm feeling. Oh, it's not thought. Oh, it's not negative then, or whatever. It's not, this negative contact is across the whole thing. It's across the whole three levels that Marion talks about. Okay. And so to interrogate it within yourself, it opens up the openness for self-responsibility that I believe the other item was talking about here. To look across all three areas.
Yeah.
To see the negative intentionality on either the feeling side, the thought side, the negative thoughts, oh, what are they thinking of me? Or the negative feelings, oh, that person really, I'm so hurt by that. Or on the will side of, oh, I need to get mine, or, so again, it's that contact is really a strong word when I feel like the guide says that.
Yeah, just to reiterate what the guide says about our path, he says, a point comes on page 4, a point comes on the path toward liberation when the problem must be tackled from both ends. Only when you have the courage and honesty to face what you do not like in yourself can you discover that the very energy and substance of these attitudes is essentially constructive and trustworthy. This realization can convert them. Consequently, life's processes will become trustworthy and need no longer be opposed. When you consider the possibility that the entire creative process is trustworthy, you will develop the courage and honesty to transcend the blocks that deform creative energy and divine substance and reconvert them into creativity. Right, so that's such another fundamental insight, which is the one energy current, right? I mean, there's really no such thing as negative energy. It's energy that's been distorted and turned in the wrong direction. If we can capture the essence of those feelings and those impulses, we can convert them into positive strength and positive energy. Tracy, I wanted to ask you my question I always ask you, which is why you pick this particular lecture, what your thinking is.
Okay, I had to unmute myself. Well, I always answer it the same way. I don't pick it. So what I do is go into a meditative state and just ask, I ask for guidance, and I'm still, and a number will pop into my head. That's how it always happens. I don't know. It's not coming from me.
Okay. I was talking about the body aspect that this lecture kind of nods toward. On page 4, he says, the peace between body and soul is an inevitable product of self-realization. It is erroneous to believe that the body can simply be left aside in the great venture of integration. When the body is shed before integration has taken place, the integration remains incomplete.
That's amazing, by the way, that last sentence.
What do you make of that?
Oh. So at first I heard that and I thought of reincarnation. I thought of losing your body. I thought of going to another state. I thought of, well, yeah, it would have been better if you kind of integrated it while you had a body, Kevin. Well, now that you're not Kevin anymore, good luck trying to integrate that part of your energy. And then here we go, another lifetime. That's what I first heard when I read that. I'm like, oh crap. Like, I guess we really have some work to do. But yeah, I don't know. It's an amazing statement. That's all I can say at this point.
Can you read that sentence again? Would you mind reading it again? The one
Sure.
that I've been speaking.
The peace between body and soul is an inevitable product of self-realization. It is erroneous to believe that the body can simply be left aside in the great venture of integration. When the body is shed before integration has taken place, the integration remains incomplete.
God realization is not possible without being in a body. As we are energy beings, we're not solid, and it's impossible. We're here in the world duality to serve in the divine, and we can't return to our unitive state without being in a body. And without discoursing more on that, it sparks one to connect with it because it's not solid. It's compressed energy. So you can't leave it behind and enter the God realized state.
Beverly, Stephen, what are your thoughts? Teresa. Go
Well,
ahead, Stephen.
there's a lot here. I'm not really sure what to do with it. I'm in a bit of turmoil here myself, and I'm trying to use what I'm hearing to try and resolve the turmoil. And I'm very aware of why I'm in this situation. I'm not blaming anybody, nor am I blaming myself. I think it involves short-term gain at the expense of what they say long-term pain. To be more specific, it's something about money and the woman I'm living with who wants to do something, and because I didn't want to reject her, I offered the money, but it was done because I probably did not want to face my feelings of fear, ending up with the relationship, or I'm a bad guy, or that I really owe it to her. And the awareness that has been coming up is that it really doesn't have much to do with her at all, but my mother. Seeing my mother in pain, which she was emotionally many times with my father, I wanted to support her, but I was very young. How could I? And I felt the intense pain of seeing my mother suffer, and I was not able to do anything. Now, offering the money involves something which really puts this person in danger, my relationship here. And I offered the money, knowing that fully, and also knowing that if I did not, I would have a great pain that I'm hurting her. And to resolve that difficulty short term, I did offer the money, but now I'm facing the consequences of that. And I'm not really sure how to deal with it, but I'm probably not dealing with it in the most meaningful way because I'm trying to wrap my arms around it intellectually as opposed to praying and being in my heart. And I keep going into the intellect, which comes up with different solutions, but none of them really resolve the issue because I feel that pain in my body. My body knows. And it feels like, yes, a duality of, on one hand, I can't resolve it. And on the other hand, there is a solution, but I have to get that solution from a different source than the intellect. So there is that state there of and I'm listening to what's going on here, and there's a lot of valuable information, and I'm going in and out. It's hard to listen because being saying, don't, we have to work this out. And it can't. My mind cannot work this out because I'm dealing with a person who is in her own ego and her own way of doing things and her own spirituality. So having made the promise, I now know that that promise has certainly allowed me to be short-term comfortable, although not that comfortable because my sleep has been impaired, and also has put both the relationship and this person in somewhat jeopardy because I don't think she can handle it. So I'm trying to resolve that, and again, I'm trying to go to the deepest part of myself, and that takes a certain degree of practice. And when I get there, I see images of my mother and images of my mother being uh, murdered, and images which never happened, but very severe images and painful for me as a child. And it was my intent to save her, which of course I could not. And they're still so deep in me that when they come up, I don't know really how to deal with it except give the other person whatever they need and want, and then suffer for it. So I don't know. I really don't. I really don't know what else to say about it. So I'm staying tuned to. I'm sure, Alan, by the end of this, you will have the solution for me. So I'm depending upon you.
Well, if we can reach our intuitive selves, then I'll be able to do that, Stephen. You touched on some things that are meaningful. I mean, when you say you felt the pain in your body, that is not just an intellectual exercise. And that's critically important, I think.
Stephen, I have a quick question for you, and I hope it's not too personal. If it is, please tell me. But are there any conditions, and again, this might be an answer that only you need to supply to yourself, not to anybody here, including me, but are there conditions to the giving to which you've provided this, to the person that you've provided it to? Okay. And is that, what does that bring to your emotions?
There are no conditions per se. I totally trust her. She said she'll leave whatever she's buying to me in her death, of which I have no interest in that. I'm not looking for her to pass away so I can get my money back. She will put me on the deed as property. She'll put me on the deed. I don't want any of that.
Yeah, it's not material conditions I'm talking about, Stephen. I'm talking about more subtle items within your heart. If the impetus to give is somehow caused by the past and somehow connected in some way to the past with the conditions between you and your mother and the feelings that you have there's some internal condition. I feel that it's maybe not material at all. Maybe material is nothing to this. You follow? And in time, maybe to pray for insight into what the conditions.
Well, I think it's a valid question. I think other than the material aspect, I think I don't know if I'd call it a condition as much as if the money's not provided, living here would be very difficult.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want to make that living as easy as possible. However, I also believe that if I promise the money, I will also resent it, and it'll be equally as difficult to live here.
Yeah.
So either way, I don't see a way out. Um, Yet I'm sure there must be, if I can reach a different area of intellect and intelligence deeper than just thinking about it.
Yeah. I understand. God bless you, Stephen.
Yeah,
Thank
God
you
bless
for
you,
the
brother.
Yeah.
This does
Yeah,
remind me a
truly.
little bit of the discussion about frustration in the second half of the lecture. You know, that there are two alternatives, neither of which is really good,
Yeah.
which seems,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
That's exactly,
Frustration is the key word here,
Exactly.
especially at 4 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep.
But isn't fear also a major part of this discussion too? I just keep thinking fear, because it seems like what's in
Well, Uh, Well, for me, I think there is fear. I mean, I've been relatively happy. There's fear that that will no longer be. There's fear that I will have to change my life. There's fear that even if I remain here, it will be uncomfortable. And I'm trying to hold all this together, and it seems like it's impossible at this stage. And I think there is fear in terms of seeing my mother hurt and damage that I cannot resolve. I think there was fear I was losing mommy. I think I agree. I think fear is the underlying emotion in all this.
this I think does have to do with the discussion of frustration. The guide says, the demand for instant gratification says, I'm not saying you want instant gratification, but says, I want to be happy and feel good without having to trust and give over to the universe. So I guess, Stephen, the question I would say for you is, what does it mean to trust and give over to the universe in this situation? What is the thing? What does that mean? How
Well,
can you do that?
I think it means giving myself up in some way. It's like some things have happened which are kind of minor that I resent and don't want. And then I realize, if I can only accept what is, my life would be much easier and smoother. But I rail against what is. It shouldn't be this way. It should be easier. Why did this happen? And I'm not talking about anything big. I'm talking about stupid little things. Flat tire. Oh my God, do I really have to deal with this now? Something like that.
Well,
But rather than just accepting this is part of life.
that's very relevant to that part of the lecture about frustration. He says, such a gentle letting go that he's talking about that we have to try to do applies to anything on all levels of existence. It may apply to any little or big wish, any fulfillment you desire. If you feel inwardly tense and are unwilling to relax into an attitude of wise, positive reasonableness and humility, without ceasing to seek complete fulfillment, you separate yourself from feeling good. Often the temptation to remain in the tense state is great, for anger and self-pity offer a substitute gratification.
Right.
Right?
And for me, I realized that there are feelings that emerge within that I don't want, that I'm trying to avoid. And I will do anything to try and avoid those feelings, which are feel horrendous and confused. And I don't want to, if I can only be with those feelings and hold it and work through it, I will make decisions which are much more satisfying, I think, for not only for myself, but for all people involved. But because I want to assuage or eliminate those feelings, I will say, sure, yeah, here's the candy, here's the money. This way I don't have to feel guilty or get into anything.
So what
But you can't. And
I would
I
suggest is writing down, concretely asking which are the feelings that I wish to avoid, and let yourself write down what they are.
I agree. Um, and right.
Hmm.
And when I'm in those feelings, I don't want it. I don't want those feelings. It shouldn't be. Why do I feel that? If I was really healthy and together after all this work, I wouldn't feel this. It's not true. I do feel it. Be with it. Have compassion for it. Where do I experience it? How do I experience it? I've read 42 books on how to deal with it, but I deal with it by going to chocolate ice cream.
One
So
for-
Alan, could I?
Of course, Joe.
You know, Stephen, I think we all have tremendous compassion for you and for what you're struggling with, and what you've expressed, you know, is your own individualized journey and battle, really, between you know, the ego, our individualized self, and our universal self, and it's in every moment, right? So you've got all these feelings, all these thoughts, and you know, it's more than you could even report at the end of the day, right? What was I thinking today? What was I feeling? And I think it goes back to what you know, what comes to my mind is what Marion often reminds us is about her toolkit, right? That sometimes we just need to plug in. So when I think about, you know, the idea that Kevin was talking about, and Marion, the unified state and the individualized self, and the spiritual teachers today, the enlightened beings that are on the earth, remind us that we already are enlightened, right? So that's our universal self, that's part of us always, and that no matter what we may think or feel in any given moment, that universal presence is always here, right? Or at
Right.
least that's what we're told. That's what the lecture's telling us. And so what that means, and we only have the now, there's only this moment, this instant, and that's every instant. And so in every instant, the universal self is here, right? It's present, it's underlying everything that we're conscious of and not conscious of. And so just, you know, the Buddhists always tell us, just breathe, right? Just breathe in and breathe out. And then you can come into contact with your universal self. And obviously it's not easy when you're in a battle like you're in now, which the Pathwork, you know, spoke of in the last lecture, that it's the difficulty, or maybe it was this lecture, the difficulties, the challenges are what brings us a greater experience of our unified self once we come through it, right? And I'll stop. But I remember once Tracy said to me that according to Pathwork, there's only extending oneself towards others, and I'm not getting the word right. What's the word that you use, Tracy? Or it doesn't matter. But so we're expansive towards others, or we're withholding. That's it. And so when I think about try to guide my decisions, you know, do I want to go out to dinner with this person, or, you know, do I want to spend time with this person? And then, I, you know, there's part of me that says, no, you know, I want to be by myself. I don't want any demands. I don't want to put the other person first. But then I say, well, wait a minute, you're withholding. That's not love. What's the most loving thing to do in any situation, in any moment? And as long as I'm guided by that, and of course, there's part of me that says, you know, screw that. I don't do that. I don't want to spend money on that, or, you know, would go out to dinner with those people and I'm going to pay more for them than for myself, whatever it is. So I think when I try to keep it simple, am I being loving? Am I extending myself to others, or am I withholding? That helps to guide me. And then to make sure I'm spending time each day where I'm present with the God energy that's always there in me, you know, whether it's just walking along or, looking at the beauty of the sky, finding something to be grateful for, just happy to have awakened today, being alive, being healthy.
That helps. Thank you. That helps. But being loving or not loving and withholding love is confusing right now, because for me, sometimes the feeling of giving in money or whatever it might be, in this case it's money, and seeing the smile on my partner's face is loving. But then I know this could be quite detrimental. So is that loving? I don't know. I mean, I can't resolve it in my own mind. I see both sides of the duality.
Well, you have to always be meditating on that primary image you have, which is you've got to make it right. Right? You've got the obligation to make it right. Now, that's not true. That's not correct. That's a misconception. But you believe it. That's an image.
At some level. Yeah, at some level, I feel responsible. You're right.
Right. And I guess you have to meditate on that until you really are able to realize that it's not, that actually it's an imposition on the other person. It's taking away their responsibility and their autonomy in a funny way. You're imposing your image into that relationship where maybe the truth is different,
I get it.
I just want to make one comment, because I don't know which lecture it is. It's the one that describes the 3 spheres of consciousness: individualized self, universal self, and universal spirit. And universal self is not the same as universal spirit. The guide is very specific. It is higher self, lower self, and mask. And that's where that tool where you sit on the bed and you shift back and forth between your higher self, lower self, and mask to give them all a voice. Universal spirit, none of this exists. It was all an illusion. It's in I don't know which lecture that is, but we have the charts. I have the charts of those 3 spheres. So it's very important what you were saying, Joel, about universal self is where you explore and you in your truth about higher self, lower self, and mask, and give them all a voice. And that's where having that in your toolbox is so valuable, because you cannot do that work without, which the guide says as a metaphor, without the hand of God. Just sitting in your bedroom doing it alone, it has to be reported into God, and that's a metaphor. So however you do that, it's up to you, working with a helper or a friend or something. It's very, very important to distinguish between these spheres of consciousness. So you can have their tools and surrender, and you feel, you just know and know you're safe.
And I also wanted to add to this, because I know the discussion maybe is not right on the lecture, but I had a similar experience where you love somebody. This was one of my best friends, and they ask for money, and I give the money, and I lend it once, I lend it twice, and then here comes 3rd time, and I just say no. And I say it with love, and I explain why, and I discuss it. And realizing, like what Stephen was saying, this might turn against somebody, seeing that this might turn against her and against our relationship, I say no, and with love, and I say, I love you, you are my friend, and I need to say no. I cannot lend you any more money, and here are my reasons why. And part of it being, I believe you can make it yourself, and part of it being, it might jeopardize our relationship, and part of it being, I don't want you to be dependent on it. And because you have some emotional connection to mother and giving and rescuing somebody, maybe there is a deeper truth that's trying to pierce out through your discomfort, saying, maybe in this situation, it's better to lovingly say no and explain why and have a discussion. Because sometimes lending money, even though it looks like an act of love, might not be an act of love, might be just act of defiance, or just like not knowing how to say no, or like taking the easier path, maybe there is a bigger discussion there, and maybe there is a loving, tough loving no. I'm not going to lend you because I don't think it's in your best interest, and have a discussion, you know?
Well, that's certainly very reasonable. I mean, the point I was making was that we do the wrong things because of our images, because of the misconceptions that we have. That's when we do the wrong thing. You know, in any relationship, I guess there's a right thing to do and wrong things to do. But you know you're doing the right thing when you feel a sense of liberation. It's a funny feeling. I think it's sort of like what the guide talks about in the lecture, the different, or not in the little monograph about the laws of personal self-responsibility. When you take full responsibility, you feel a liberated feeling. You feel a good feeling about your actions. And I do believe that when you don't feel that feeling, your images are involved, your misconceptions about the erroneous way that you think reality works, which really it doesn't work that way. You know, I mean, I've certainly grappled with my main image. I think it's sort of similar to yours, Stephen, you know. Like I also believe that I've got to make it right for like the woman, like my mother. And if I do that, if I become dependent, everything will be fine. And it doesn't work out because the paradox is that when you give up your independence, you actually inspire contempt because people want an independent person. They want a strong person. You believe the way to fulfillment is through, I believe the way to fulfillment is through dependency, but it's actually not that. That's a misconception. Yeah. When my mother, when I was 4 years old, my brother died in a fire. And I felt like my mother drew me much closer. And I kind of felt like, hey, her happiness depends on me. I've got to make things right. That, of course, was a misconception. And that's sort of what I'm getting at, you know, to find the misconception, mull it over, meditate on it, and then you'll find yourself, you can liberate yourself from it.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Alan. That is so clear. That is so clear. And the guide stresses those images. You can do a lot of work. We never do the final work alone. So I can't say what's right for anybody else because we're letting go of the old. We haven't grabbed onto the new yet. And that's the basis of the lecture, Abyss of Illusion. We haven't grounded in the new reality yet. We're letting go of the old. Feels like we're going to fall in the crocodile pit, only to find out it was one little step. That's why we need someone to hold the space for us. And only you can decide that. I can't tell you what to do. But you cannot do all that work alone just by thinking through it. Some of it you can.
Yeah, that's so interesting because before there were helpers, there were image finding teams where the guide encouraged people, you know, you hook up with somebody else on our spiritual path and you go over the images. What's my main image? What are my misconceptions? How did they get created? And you find them. And then there are keys to liberating yourself, unlocking opportunity in your life, unlocking potentials that you couldn't have achieved if you were still trapped in these misconceptions. Beverly, what are your thoughts?
It is a lot to process. But what struck me the most from the discussion, excuse me, is the idea of the negative thoughts, will, and feelings, and how those three things create so much fear that the tendency is to push away any possibility of love or the union. Just like Ellen said, the whole idea of fear and just how great that is and how that creates so many walls.
Yeah.
That's what struck me.
And I guess the way to remove them is just to explore those fears, right? To really look at them. Like, to me, this lecture is like falling in love, you know? You found somebody, you want to fall in love, the pool is immense, you get all sorts of feelings, and then you are, wait a minute, I'm going to lose my independence. I'm not going to be the same person. I'm going to have to change. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do that.
Mm.
This is not going to work out. And you start, giving the fear a voice, and the ego starts separating you from that very natural, very beautiful pool that you really could have, saying, yeah, I'm falling in love. Let's find out who that person is. And if it's really worth the loving, right? Rather than just giving in and saying, oh my God, I'm going to have to become dependent now. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose that. And the fear stops immediately, and you start withdrawing from that feeling, even though the pull is there. So to me, it's like, wait a minute, let's get to know the person. Let's see if this can really be love. And if so, let's go for it. Right? And if not, let them reveal by their action, why not? Rather than blocking myself from the inside, saying, oh my God, I'm going to lose this, I'm going to lose that. This is going to happen, this is going to happen. Same goes with friendship. I just had to break up with one of my good old friends, acquaintances, for many, many years, because she hurt me in a very deep way. She wouldn't apologize. And, she doesn't recognize, she doesn't take responsibility, like what Alan was saying. She's exact opposite to this. Everything is everybody else's fault. So I can't be really friends. But, but yet it was my decision to withdraw from that relationship. And as painful as it was, I went through this whole thing and I was like, well, I love her. She's this, that, and the other, but she also has this, and this is not acceptable to me. So I think even with friendship, if you have pulled to friendship, you can always withdraw later if people really do become unbearable, or, you just can't respect their values, or they hurt you in some meaningful way that you cannot put up with. But I think the lecture is saying, before we even give ourselves a chance to really engage in love, in friendship, in meaningful contact, in deep conversation, and soul searching, and something that's, I guess that's the pleasure extreme, just being uninhibited in a relationship with another soul, we start putting self-defenses, and all of this shit starts hitting the fan, and the images and everything plays up like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, that's going to cost me this. Oh, this is going to be a problem. Sooner or later, if it's going to be a problem, it's going to be a problem. But you have to give yourself a chance. You have to open up and say, it feels good. It feels like love. Let's go for it. And let him prove to me that it cannot be love, because I'm all in. I am in. I'm feeling the pull. I'm feeling the feelings. I am all in. Let him show me why it cannot be. Or I want this friendship. I need more people in my life. I'm opening up. This looks like an interesting person. I have a lot in common. Let me go for it. And let me just try and let her prove to me why we cannot be friends. I can always disengage in a loving way, but let me not put any defenses before I even go in and try it. Let me just give it my all, give it a clean shot. That's how I kind of sort of read this lecture. Like, don't have this internal block and pull stop you from something that could really create something beautiful, meaningful, and valuable within your energy field, the human energy field.
I like that. I like what you're saying. Yeah, because the guy does talk about unification with another. And so that the metaphor of love seems very important. And it does really harmonize with what the lecture is talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
And Teresa, it's perfectly the law of personal responsibility that Alan started with. What you just said was a direct application of that law. It's that openness that we were talking about. So that was beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I didn't even see it that way. Thank you for bringing that, Kevin. Good to see you.
It's responsible for how you see things, for the openness that you are present for without prejudging it, exactly as you said it. It was beautiful.
Yeah, just going in an open heart and soul and
Openness. It's openness.
Yeah.
It's not this narrow band that Alan was mentioning about politics. Yes, it's the wide open view, potential.
Yeah, potential. Like, I'm all in. I'm all in.
I'm all in. Exactly.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Hey, Rita, what are your thoughts?
Hi, Alan. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Rita.
I guess it seems like if we can completely incorporate any one lecture, it would be everything. And I think for me, slowing things down is helpful. So everything that I've been listening intently to all the shares, and I completely resonate with everything. It's so much easier to, when we have the blessing of being able to get together like this and talk so with such open hearts about about life. It makes sense, right? And then in practice, it's not as easy.
Well, that's the big dichotomy, right? The duality, the versus unitive state, right? I mean, duality is rough, it's difficult, it's aggravating, it's painful.
Right. That's why. So all the more to value the time that we have here now and the support that we give each other, and to know that we're not alone on this, in our way of growth mindset living. Yeah. So it's, yes, this unitive. It's a worthy goal, and it's probably worth reflecting on where, when we're in a moment of total unified being. If you're, I don't know, like flying a kite or playing in the ocean, or any moment where you completely forget yourself, and that's total unity. And to be able to bring that to other things that are maybe not as easy would be my goal.
Yeah. So you kind of alternate between experiences of unity and the experience of duality, and hopefully you get closer and closer to that unitive state more of the time. Like I'd like to think of a metaphor of a necklace, where the pearls on the necklace are the unitive state, and you're between one pearl and then there's another one, then there's another one, and maybe at some point you only feel the pearl and not the emptiness between the pearls.
Yeah, that's a good one. Something like the resistance. I think we all have a point where there's a no current for something. Like if I'm working on an endeavor that's like you were talking about the frustration. So there's where no current comes in, and then I have to. I'm so frustrated. Then what am I saying no to, or where am I saying no? And actually, it might even be a good thing, because maybe it's not good for me after all. Or maybe I'm trying to go too fast or something like this. So it gives pause, but
Right. So, right. That's right. Well, that's why all these recognitions that we all are coming to are so individual and so specific, and it's difficult to generalize. Where it may be right for you to press on and ignore the resistance, or conversely, it might be more important for you to take a breath, drop on the side, and like kind of wait, take a pause, but I can't tell you that. You have to feel into what's right. And of course, the key to a lot of it is these images, the misconceptions that play into a lot of our habitual patterns, and make it, hopefully we're able to recognize where we're kind of going astray in the same way over and over again, those are the images that are destructive, that we can then, hey, wait a second, I'm doing this again. And I don't need to.
Yeah, Rita, the exact item you mentioned, how you phrased it, sounds like a wonderful application to what's on page 5, where the guide mentions for real pleasure to be felt, a relaxed inner state is necessary. A flexible inner climate must prevail, producing a life-affirming, positive, inclusive attitude. So basically, if I pause there, if I want something, and maybe it's right for me, maybe it's not right for me, who the heck knows, right? But if I'm wanting it more than my state of mind to be at somewhat a level of relaxed inner peace, then perhaps it's better to pause and find that relaxed inner state. I think that's what the guide was saying there.
Yeah.
So the last line of that paragraph, Alan, was, it is human error to assume, and I laughed when I read this, to assume that what you want is more important and pleasure producing than your state of mind. It's just
More important and pleasure producing?
That's
yeah,
a
right.
very interesting sentence, right? It is human error to assume that what you want is more important and pleasure producing than your state of mind.
Yeah.
Now let's unpack that a little bit. He's saying that your state of mind right now is very important. And later on, he says, if you feel inwardly tense and are unwilling to relax into an attitude of wise, positive reasonableness and humility, without ceasing to seek complete fulfillment, you separate yourself from feeling good. So I guess the guide is this correct, Kevin? That if you're single-mindedly trying to pursue what you quote unquote want, wait a second, isn't it more important to try to relax into that attitude of wise, positive reasonableness?
Correct. Correct. It's allowing what is to be present and to be happy with what is present and what comes and arrives in your life in the manner that it does arrive, versus the demand of I want it thus and I want it now. And if I know we don't often consciously say that in our minds, because it would sound like we're a 2-year-old, but yet we hide that from ourselves. Our heart very often wants something that it cannot have, let's say, in this very moment. And when we're denied that, it's easy to tether to the want versus to tether to realize that what we're really seeking is an acceptance and a letting go of the here and now as it presently is. And if we could do that, then this life force that she's talking about here, or he's talking about here, sorry, that the guide is showing here for the cosmic pull, will provide what you want in time. But in the very instant of insistence, we block ourselves and we push what we want further away, ultimately.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. I just want to add something to that, because I sometimes do a little humorous kind of stand-up routine with that one, because wants are a gateway to the real needs. So don't throw away the wants. Have the list of wants with little equal signs. What's my real need? And the real need takes some digging, takes some help to find that real need. Because if you stay with the wants, I take on the form of God, like I'm God. And since I grant all your wishes, I will say, oh, you want more leisure or pleasure? I'll give you wanting more. Oh, you want more money? I'll give you wanting more.
That's funny, man.
So it's kind of my little, when I play God. And so, but the wanting opens the heart. Don't give up the wanting, but don't stay in the wanting. Let it be an equal sign to real needs and get help defining what the real needs are, because your higher power will always fulfill those, always.
That is very deep.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Marianne.
But the other part of that is that what you want most deeply is always here. To me, that's the additionally to what you, because what we want and on here and our wants is in the human form is I think that's what the whole point is secondary to the want of this unitive state. So any of our earthly wants are second. Isn't that?
Well, the wanting is coming from a place of deficiency. The being open to real needs is opening to the continuous abundance of the universe that is constantly flowing to each one of us. It never stops. We
Right.
just clog up our
It's
channel.
always here, right? It's
Yeah, we
always
just
here.
clog up our channels with wanting from a place of deprivation. I wanted. And so I'm saying, let that open the heart, because that's the new brain is the heart.
Yeah.
And let that open the heart. But it takes some digging to get to the real needs. And that's a lot in the lectures too, finding your real needs.
Yeah,
It
real
takes
needs
some,
versus false needs, right?
yes, real needs versus false needs. It takes some digging and some help, but those will always be fulfilled because it unclogs the channel and you just accept what's always been there all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good lecture, Stephen. Real needs and false needs. Yeah. Oh, hey,
Actually, I really wanted to talk. I really wanted to say something.
go ahead, go ahead.
Um,
Because I was going to call on Juan because he hadn't said anything, but go ahead.
I okay.
Juan, you're up next.
Okay. Get me out of the way, and then I'll want.
Go ahead. Go. No, no.
Okay.
We're fully in the moment with you, Alan. I promise.
It's been a couple.
100%. No
It's been a
pass,
couple
no.
of weeks since I've been like I really want to say something. Like tonight, I really wanted to say something, which is that to me, so I can put myself on the spot to talk, and I'm like, oh no, I can't talk now. That the pull. Okay, so the cosmic pull towards union, right? So we have a cosmic pull towards union, but this whole fact that the divine pull, the fact that we come into physical life in and of itself is a pull towards separation. Inherent in it is the pull towards separation. So I just find this incredibly so while it's true that our childhood experiences and our traumas inform our the illusion of separation, it's also the divine process that we're pulled towards separation, that physical life itself and the body and the experience of the body it's inherent in it is the experience. I have a hand. If this hand gets stabbed, it's like I am being separated from my
You mean that we come here as individuals with our individual challenges?
yeah, and that it's not that there's like a little yeah, and that our spirits, we that part of the issue is that we actually crave the human experience. We crave the separation. We crave I have this body. Like if you're the divine being is coming into a body, it's like I think we get fascinated a little bit. I mean, I feel like if I think about some of the things I've experienced with the physical illness issues, and I think to myself, well, this is the way that my soul is giving me my lessons in this life, by experiencing this powerful belief that I'm my body is in danger, that that I'm actually that I can actually die. I can actually, when it's an illusion. See, I know as soon as I feel like I'm talking, and it's like it's like oh, I'm saying the words, and it's like I haven't completely lost contact with it, but wow, it's just
Yeah, no,
it's
I think I know what you're
amazing.
saying. I mean, we come to Earth and we experience the feelings of limitation, the consciousness of limitation.
Yeah.
That's just by design, that's on purpose.
Right.
with a
And
goal.
I'm also bringing it up because I think it facilitates the ability to relax. So it's about acceptance. You know, it's like I mean, I know for me, you know, there's this tendency to pathologize and it's like, oh God, you know, the childhood, the trauma, the things, you know, you know, the whole concept of self-facing. But it's like, no, this is the, this is the divine process, is this
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
crazy planet Earth. And it's like, relax, surrender, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
accept
yeah,
this.
yeah.
That and I want to just, I know this is kind of funny, but I'm doing, I think I've mentioned this, I'm doing DBT therapy right now, which is dialectical behavior therapy. And one of the incredible gifts of it is, and when I first was like, why did she make such an obtuse thing with a dialectic? And now that I'm into that, I've done 6 months of it, it's really helping me with the powerful idea that so many things in life are two opposite things that coexist. And I feel like this, you know, like it's so perfect for this lecture. She's saying the divine, the pull towards union and the pull towards separation. That it's
Beautiful, Ellen. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Prior, when I was reading this lecture, Ellen, I just want to share one thing that matches what you were saying, is that life arises here on this universe, or in this universe, in a balance between the attractive and the repulsive forces. It's not just attraction only, because if it was, it would only be a single black hole that would suck you back in, and there'd be no choice in that whatsoever. But gravity, if you even look at the physicality of our universe, the beauty is that the repulsive along with the attractive is in harmony here for the time it takes. That's natural, or let's say part of our intuitive nature, to orbit around a sun, even, right? To have the season cycle come from that, to have cellular biology arise out of that, right? To even just play in whirlpools. These are self-organizing items that would never be able to happen without the attractive force of gravity. It's not a black hole. It's not just attraction.
And without the polarity, that word
But you need,
polarity of the
yes,
physical. And it's not, and in the spirit, there is no polarity, but in the physical, it has to be in this at least the one we're in.
yes. And it's a blessing, Ellen, just like you said. It is a blessing, because the word that came to me when I was thinking this was opportunity, right? It's like if what we really only wanted was union, we would never have the opportunity to choose that union, right? But in this moment, we're afforded the opportunity to play with the dance in the process of being separate, and to choose union, and to recognize union as important instead of fearing it. That's beautiful, Ellen. Thank you. Thank you for
That was
sharing.
a beautiful mystical awareness, I would say,
Thank you.
Ellen. Really. And yeah, because you know that's why we're greater than the angels, right? In the Christian cosmology, because the angels never fell, and we have the opportunity to integrate everything. But we fell, and we're trying to get our way back by integrating these polarities and dualities. Hey, Juan, do you have thoughts?
Hi, everybody. Well, there is a lot to say, Alan, here. I mean, I thank you all guys for all your beautiful sharing there. It's all absolutely part of it. You know, I usually have a little bit of a problem, you know, expressing my thoughts when it comes to this material, because, you know, to me, it all makes perfect sense. When I read it, you know, usually I understand the wisdom of the guide, and I'm just like one wow after the other, like wow, my God, this is an incredible wisdom here, you know. It's very beautifully the way I intuitively understanding, and I guess that's kind of my problem, because I feel that I'm kind of the intuitive personality type. So I have a lot of problems sometimes putting into words, expressing what I do feel within. But you know, this lecture is enormous. I mean, there is so much wisdom here. There is so much to say, and so much to learn and really grasp, and not only grasp, but really kind of like make it a part of every particle, of every atom and electrons of ourselves, and just really be able to, put it into practice. I mean, we have here three enormous concepts, as you mentioned in the beginning, the self-responsibility, and then this pulling, and then the frustration. Obviously, the three of them are interconnected because, especially in the beginning, the self-responsibility part, that's really is the first step, because as the guy says, once you take that first step and you assume that responsibility, that self-responsibility, you make yourself responsible for your behavior, for your life, for what comes into your life, for the troubles and traumas and images and everything else that is stopping you from giving into this pulling, from giving into this spiritual force. And you assume the responsibility. Wait a minute, this is not life, this is not destiny, this is not my parents, this is not my past reincarnation. It's all me. It's all here, and in the here and now. And it is for me to deal with it. How? By first taking that first step, assuming that self-responsibility. I am the one responsible. I'm the one who is creating all the situations and attracting all the people that are annoying me and making my life miserable, and everything else that I blame. It is me. I'm responsible for that. And then then that leads into the second topic of the pulling, or the cosmic pulling of I am pulled. I mean, consciousness divided. When we fell, the way I understand it, consciousness divided. So now the work for that cosmic consciousness is to bring us back, to unite again. So everything is working towards that, to really cause us to go back to that center where we fell from. And then this entity, which are humans, we're in a human body, which is really the higher evolved level of consciousness that we know. Of course, there is the animal kingdom, and there is a plant kingdom, and there is, even the metal kingdoms. All that is part of that consciousness, but we are at a higher level right now, where our next step is really that, to unite, with the closest, to unite with that center. So if we give into that pulling, then it will be so much easier. To me, at the end of the day, it all boils down to that surrendering, to just relaxing into that state of what is, and just giving to that force. And if we are able to do that, everything else is easier. Everything else becomes easier. But then there is so much stopping us from doing that. And one of it is obviously the frustration, because the fear of not giving into that, that pulling, causes that frustration, and then we can deal with that frustration. We can work with it, and then you become paralyzed, and then anxiety and disharmony and everything else negative comes along, and which kind of move you further from what you are here to do, which is that unification with that, with that center. So basically, to make the long story short, and not really go on prolong this too much more, the way I understand it, when we are able to really purify those distortions and those images and those wrong conclusions that you've been mentioning, and really allow ourselves to just surrender to that pulling, and allow it to drive us, as you read in the beginning, that beautiful poem, that beautiful meditation, just allowing that power, that inner current to really possess us, that inner pulling to possess us, and really will help us in everything else that we need. And even to it will make life easier, it will make the work easier, the work of purification easier, because we won't be blocking it. But in order to do that, and it will even allow us, and will even help us to work with our fears and that self-will and that pride and all that vanity and everything else that is keeping us from it. But the thing is to be able to really reach that level of surrendering. And that's that part. And I wanted to comment try to be quickly here, and because that sentence also that you guys were talking about earlier, that sentence that you read on page 4, when you read, when the body is shed before integration has taken place, the integration remains incomplete. And that sentence also struck me very powerfully because I come from a Catholic background, and obviously I still belong also to an organization which is called Self-Realization Fellowship. So what I thought when I read this sentence was about monks and nuns, and how the sexual drive, how this denial of this natural instinct, this beautiful, most beautiful current in the universe, when it's denied, and you deny not only this on this occasion, but you denied and suppressed those instincts that are natural, that are beautiful current, and that as the guy says, they are light bearer, they spread light, they're beautiful. And then when you suppress that, and you don't allow the natural instinct, those natural instincts, which are naturally a part of that pulling, and we suppress it and deny it, that's separates us. So we, as much as the guy even talks about here in several parts, they are highly illumined masters, even that because they have denied this reality, this instinct, this natural instinct, they leave the body. Yes, they shed the body. Obviously, you all have to do that eventually. But realization will be incomplete if you don't accept and connect with those natural instincts. I mean, one of the main one being that sexual one. So that sentence actually made me thought of that, and it was ironic because one of those very high nuns where to the organization that I belong, she's considered like really high up there, like an illumined master almost. And I had a very beautiful, vivid dream with her some time ago that I saw her meditating like in a very desolated place, like very lonely meditating. And I said, oh my God, what is she doing meditating there? She's supposed to be self-realized. This woman, why is she still meditating there in the orange robe and, and just alone, like all separated like that? And I woke up in the morning, it's like, wow, that is a very interesting dream. So when I read this line, the two of them clicked together and I'm like, oh, that might explain clearly what my dream meant. This might have been or might be the situation with this special soul, with this nun, who is considered enlightened here for most of us. But to the spirit world, it might be a completely different story. So I just wanted to share that. And thank you very much all for listening.
Thank you, Juan. Very interesting. It occurred to me that as the chief chef of the Hilton, you probably have really gotten a masterclass in dealing with frustration. It must have been so many times you had to let go to what, had to happen and giving up your ego, right? I can just imagine what that was all about.
Yes. Yeah, you said it. That's, and I have a lot of problem with that because my nature also, one of my defects, actually, one of my problem, the issue that I'm working with, and I have been working with for the longest time, much less at this point of obviously, that I'm very impatient. I get frustrated when things don't happen. I have that willpower, that will personality. I want to have things my way. I want to control things, and I go to the extreme to have things fall smoothly and I have control of it. So when that doesn't happen, if I'm waiting for the train is supposed to arrive in 5 minutes and it doesn't, and you know about trains, right?
Yep.
So when it doesn't arrive on time, I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And then you get all frustrated. I'm very, very impatient and I become very frustrated. Of course, the way I've been dealing with that is I do to the extreme, like in the kitchen as a chef being responsible, you have me preparing, doing mise en place like 3 days in advance in order to avoid, this last minute thing. But it always happened. It's the last menu was increased by 200 people last minute. Oh, the convention is now 300 instead of 100. And and so on and so forth. It's like, oh, this 20 case of letters didn't arrive on time. So what are we going to do now? So we have to substitute, and so it's never perfect. But working in this field and in dealing with this situation and being a human, obviously, you really helps you to overcome and work with this, with these blockages.
Yeah.
And burdens. So it's all good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I?
Barbara, yeah, and
Yeah,
look, Barbara, I just want to say I'm really grateful that you're here, and I really, my heart goes out about Bill, and I welcome you here, and it's so good to see you.
Thank you. I I really appreciate being here. You know, I I just wanted to share that I feel like Bill and I were married for 46 years, and I feel like I was very blessed. And you know, the idea of, you know, just relating to the lecture in terms of unity, that I feel like I had, like, on a human plane, like an experience of really being loved and loving someone. And the other thing that I wanted to say was that you know, Bill had a terminal illness. You know, we knew he was going to be, you know, we knew this for about 3 years actually, but in the last 2 months, he was in rehab and I was there with him every day. And there was, I had, you know, it was sort of like, no, I had no control, you know, who knew, you know, and I just was relating a lot to what Juan was saying, and this idea of giving over, or you know, just being present, and going with what was happening, you know, not being, that you can't control anything. And not that I was like giving up, but especially after Bill died, where I was just, you know, very overwhelmed and all of that, that I felt like I had to go with, you know, like there like decisions to make, you know, I don't know what to do. There was so much I didn't know. And that there was sort of like this, and I tend to be a person who's a little angsty, you know, like always like, oh, I made the wrong decision, I did this wrong, you know. And so there was this experience of just kind of like letting go. And there was so much that happened that just felt like it was serendipitous. I mean, even when the day that Bill died, his best friend had come to visit. So he was there with me. And so I wasn't alone. That's, you know, just, I was too late, you know, with the Jewish tradition of, excuse me, having like a shiva and having food delivered to your house. I didn't realize I had to order it ahead of time. And it was the holiday season. So like, you know, Zabar's, Whole Foods, all these, you know, nobody had any food. They says, no, it'll take us 48 hours. We can't deliver. And then my daughter-in-law says, oh, I'll call Fresh Direct, have it delivered to your house in the morning, and I'll make platters. I'll come at 8 and make platters. You know, so I guess it's kind of like this feeling of faith in the universe that so that's what I wanted to share.
The faith is the key. Trust.
So this was a really good lecture to read for me. I took everything totally personally.
As you should. Yeah. Thank you.
So she's mentioned a beautiful thing, that she had that deep union, spiritual union, love union with another human being. And I saw from her prior, you know, how loving she was. I was wondering, Barbara, do you feel that union is resolved now that Bill just left his physical body, or do you still feel that love and the union continuing? If I may.
You're muted, Barbara.
I'm not sure if I understand your question. I feel like I mean, I still love Bill. He's still here with me in a way.
Okay, that's
yeah.
what I wanted to hear. So that union did not dissolve. That is not
No, no, no.
Yeah,
Well,
Junior.
the thing is, I feel like my next challenge is loving myself and, I mean, not, and like having, it's like, I don't want to die. It's like a new, I feel like I always have that. I feel like I have such a feeling of completeness, but I feel like there's like maybe my next chapter.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you. So that union didn't dissolve, but it made you feel complete.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot to meditate about, my friends. So 10 minutes, let's meditate on what we learned tonight and the power of the cosmic pull toward union. And may we find out the blocks that prevent us from giving into that pull. And may we eliminate the obstructions through the path of self-facing. And the strength, of course, of our communion with others, because as Marian always says, we can't do it alone, right? All right, thank you. 10 minutes.